I really want to thank Donald Trump for raising an issue that's been in America for a very long time. I apologize to you that I'm speaking slower than is a good thing, but I am running, and you're probably asking, why am I running? I think I said that in my first video about not having time. I realize I could force time into my schedule when I'm in a still place. Running does stimulate the mind, though. But getting back to what I was saying, I think we're overestimating Donald Trump in two ways. Number one, he's not the problem. He's just the current symptom of a long festering problem. Probably the eternal history of humankind between freedom and selfishness / slavery. But the other reason I think Donald Trump should not get all the credit is because it's really his followers. It's the people who willingly choose to rally around him that's getting the rest of us very nervous. I think we're upset, but those of us who are allowing this to upset us are doing so because they've never seen such energy for such a regressive and backward modality of thinking, of being, of governing. It seems that such regression has taken a hit. Well, that's not totally so. There have been people on the far left who have said for a very long time, I remember years ago, about how those with power are always looking for ways to maintain that power, and they use very unsavory and very deceptive methods of keeping their power so that the rest of us have just enough to survive enough to support them. If I didn't take in a roommate, I literally would just be feeding my landlord and eating the scraps that are left over. That's the ratio between what my job pays me and what I have to pay as a tenant in the building where I live. I think that's the situation that many of us are in. Why are we even here? Why are we alive? The money that we make, that we sweat for, that we toil for, goes to someone else in the end. This is the battle that progressives have fought since the dawn of time, and it's also the battle that regressives, which I think that's the best way to call conservatives and Republicans, regressives, backward-thinking people. It's people who are afraid to upset the easy order of hierarchy, of slavery, of inequality. The present domination of the headlines by Donald Trump is just a manifestation of that. And the reason I'd like to thank Donald Trump, and really it's his supporters, again, it's never the person at the top who does practically nothing but make a lot of noise. It's the people, it's the masses of people that rally behind such a person or around such a person, that follow such a person. They're the ones who we should be thanking for bringing this issue to the forefront. That's always been there. As I said before, the powerful will always look for ways to destroy any progress and maintain their order. The recession of 2008 I believe, was completely avoidable. It was man-made, therefore, as human beings, we had it within our power to stop it. Of course, it took a lot of other things, like stealing an election in the state of Florida in 2000. And even though the official line of the media that right-wingers call the left-wing media was that because the Supreme Court decided it and stopped counting the votes in Florida, it was fair. The reality is, it was stolen. Not because Al Gore won the state of Florida. That's something that we're never going to know. But it was stolen because no attempt was made to ascertain a clear truth about the voting in Florida, and in the absence of that, reinstitute a new vote, which is the wisest and most sensible thing to do. But people with power never do wise and sensible things. They do selfish and greedy things, which in the end always comes to hurt them. Most of us don't like that, if we're even aware of it. The powerful have a lot of tools at their disposal to making us think it's someone else. The people who support Donald Trump don't even realize how much he's contradicted himself so many times. George W. Bush, whose presidency was in huge part responsible for the recession that's causing a lot of unhappiness in the world today, was able to call John Kerry a flip-flopper on one statement, or two, well, actually two, but two different statements he had made on the same issue. Actually, it was one statement where he said he supported the war in Iraq before he was against it. Which actually is not a bad thing, because wisdom demands that we use the best judgment of the situation that we see before us. And if later on we realize it wasn't the best judgment, that's the better thing than to stick by a position that seemed wiser at the time, later turned out to be wrong. Now, I'm not even going to go into getting into Iraq, which those who never voted for it, like Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump, all like to take pride that they were against it. Well, 95% of the American public was propagandized and manipulated into being for it, partially by the shock of September 11th, which was perpetuated upon us by a completely different enemy, although not completely unrelated, but definitely not from Iraq. That's how gullible the American people have been, and still continue to be. I'm happy to see that all of the internet chatter has had some positive effect on what previously was a non-internet population who was dumbed down by cable TV. There's enough people out there reading, going on websites that actually have intelligent things to say, and therefore the average discourse about politics has changed. Also, we haven't had anything humongous like September 11th occur for quite a while, and people who barely remember it even are now getting of voting age. So all that plays into what we have today. But as far as the stuff, flip-flopping and going back, Donald Trump is the master of it. It's almost like he decides, as far as people who are gullible and caught up in him, what the truth is at the moment. He's been forced by the outlandish nature of the things he said to admit that he's changed his view. So that kind of knocks anything about Hillary Clinton changing her views off the table in the fall. Just like the Benghazi thing didn't wash either, and it made the Republicans look bad. Now I know I came in here to say something. Oh yes, we should be thankful to them. The reason that I'm here is not to get crazy about the 2016 election. The reason I'm here is to elucidate that Donald Trump and his followers is simply, or are simply, a manifestation of something that's been around for ages. I've outlined it in these videos very clearly. It's the fight between equality and freedom on the one hand, and slavery and hierarchy on the other. I've also outlined that when the going gets tough, the tendency in people is to submit to the hierarchical and slavery way of living and governing because they're scared. They want a dictator who they could just turn everything over to, just like King Lear turned everything over to his two daughters that praised him and gave nothing to the one that told him the truth. That's the American public, King Lear. But they haven't read Shakespeare's tragedy, so they have no idea how tragically it not only ends, but proceeds through most of the play. Because by Act 2, this king who never knew what living without power was like has had all his power stripped from him. This is why people show up at those Trump rallies sincerely to protest and to give the other voice a side.